If there is a day equal to the impactful magnitude of a day of terror, it is the day after. The adrenaline has subsided. A new reality has set in. This is not a nightmare. Yesterday, 60 years ago, John Cross Jr., an Arkansas native, now in his second year as pastor of Birmingham, Alabama's 16th Street Baptist Church, was about to preach a sermon on Luke 23:34, entitled A Rock That Will Not Roll, about how the crucified Jesus asks the Father to forgive those murdering him, and how that grounds Christian lives of forgiveness and love. The Sunday school hour was already underway. The classes were studying Genesis 45, 4 through 15, focusing on how Joseph forgave his brothers, trusting God's sovereignty in suffering. Joseph told them, "Do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." While these black Christian men and women were gathered in the name of the resurrected Jesus to magnify his name and worship him, at least 4 white men were expecting to send them to their deaths. They detonated a bomb to terrorize and murder the black men and women inside. 4 little girls were slain. Others were injured, including one girl who was blinded in one eye. 2 boys, aged 16 and 13, were later murdered as the day unfolded. Today, 60 years ago, families began a new day, the first without their loved ones. A pastor awakened, if he had slept at all, to face the reality of a congregation in grief and a city in crisis. Hours earlier, he had followed the screams of children through the smoke, had dug through the basement's rubble alongside church members, and had found the bodies of the slain stacked in a pile, clinging together. Pastor Cross said, "Their bodies were so mutilated, I couldn't recognize any one of them as well as I knew these girls. It was like looking at strangers." But that was yesterday. Today he had families to comfort, hospital visits to make, a devastated church to pastor, a justifiably enraged community to lead, a building to repair, and yes, funeral services to prepare. He had to do so under the tyranny of white supremacy and systemic injustice, with no reasonable expectation that right would be done and the perpetrators caught and convicted. Indeed, it wasn't until the early 2000s that justice was finally served on 2 of those responsible. How could Pastor Cross do it? Standing on the rock he was supposed to preach about that September morning. The bombing blew out the face of a stained glass representation of Jesus in the church building. And doubtless, in those dark days, many, even the pastor, were looking for the face of Jesus. Like the psalmist of Psalm 10, they might have prayed, "Why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" And like the psalmist, they could answer in faith, "O Lord, you hear the desire of the afflicted. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, so that man who is of the earth may strike terror no more." Pastor Cross knew it. Jesus is the rock that will not roll. When darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. Through every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand.